I want to welcome you to our study in the book of 1 Corinthians. Today we're in 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter, verse number 1. I hope that you're enjoying this study in the book of 1 Corinthians. And again, I want to ask you this, that you would go and take some time and listen to all of these podcasts in sequence, because it will build within you a tremendous understanding of the book of 1 Corinthians. The book of 1 Corinthians is written to a church. It's not written to an individual, but it's written to a church that's messed up. It's written to a church that's got problems with immorality. It's got problems with divorce. It's got all kinds of problems going on in the church. And you know, when I was praying several months ago over what book of the Bible the Lord would have me go to, the Lord directed me to 1 Corinthians. And he directed me to 1 Corinthians because many of the problems that are being faced in our churches today are the same problems that were being faced in the church in Corinth. And so that's one of the reasons why we're doing a study in the book of 1 Corinthians. Now, we're in 1 Corinthians. We're in the 11th chapter, verse number 1. And the Apostle Paul opens this chapter with an amazing statement. He's been talking about living a life before unbelievers and not being an offense to them, not violating their conscience by some of the things that we can do. And then he says in verse number 1, he says, "Be an imitator of me, just as I also am of Christ." Wow. He's talking about living in front of people. Whether those people are believers or unbelievers, we need to be conscious of how we live in front of people. So Paul says, be an imitator of me. What confidence the Apostle Paul has. He says, you know what? Do what I do. The word imitator, it actually means to mime someone or to mimic someone. It comes from the Greek word, and the word mimic actually has the same root word as this Greek word. It means to act like. It means to do what someone else is doing. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself doing something that someone else has done? You know, my dad was a wonderful, wonderful man. He's been with the Lord for many years now in heaven. But you know what? I find myself saying things that my dad said. One of his expressions was, buy cheap, got cheap. In other words, when you're looking to buy something that you're going to use, make sure you buy something of quality. I think about that all the time. When I'm standing in a store and looking at something, do I buy the cheap one or do I buy the quality one? Well, you see, we mimic people. And the Apostle Paul says, be an imitator of me. Go right ahead and do what I do. Now, why can he say that with such confidence? Well, it's the next statement that he makes. He says, because I am an imitator of Jesus. I'm a mimic of Jesus, just as I also am of Christ. What would Jesus do? What would he do in the situations that we're faced in? You know, many years ago, people would wear these bracelets with WWJD on. It actually came out of a youth ministry, I believe, where the youth pastor was praying and saying, how can I get my kids my youth to do what Jesus does. And so they came up with this idea, put it on a bracelet with WWJD on it, and they can look at it and say, what would Jesus do in this situation? You see, we as believers need to adopt that into our lives. What would Jesus do? If Jesus was driving the car and somebody cut you off, what would Jesus do? If someone slandered you, what would Jesus do? If someone said something bad about you, what would Jesus do? If someone attacked you, what would Jesus do? If someone offered you food, what would Jesus do? If you saw someone that was poor, what would Jesus do? So the Apostle Paul says, be imitators of me just as I am of Christ. And then he goes on, verse number 2. Now I praise you because you remember me in everything and hold firmly to the traditions just as I have delivered them to you. What's Paul saying? He's saying, you know what? I am so thankful. He says, I praise you. I adore you. I give you a place of respect. Why? Because you remember me in everything. They remembered what Paul did. See, Paul lived with the Corinthians, I believe it was for 18 months. He was an example. You know, one thing that we seem to be lacking in churches is examples of believers. Paul says, you're remembering me. I'm so thankful. I praise you. I adore you. I love you because you remember everything that I've done. And then he goes and he says, and holding firmly to the traditions which I have delivered to them also. What's he saying? He's saying, you're holding firm to the traditions. Now, the word traditions means the delivered teachings. The Apostle Paul is not writing a theological book, so to speak. He's writing a book about problems in the church at Corinth. You know what I found out? And there's many churches that are theologically secure. But inside the walls of those churches, there's fighting, there's bigotry, there's judgment, there's all kinds of things going on that are causing that church not to grow, that are causing that church to be divided and pulled apart. And so Paul says, you know what? You're hanging on to the traditions that I gave to you. And the Apostle Paul is saying, I am so thankful that you're remembering what I did. In other words, you're remembering that I gave you an example to follow. Let me just say this. If there's no example, there's nothing to follow. And then he says, you're hanging on to that teaching, to the teaching of doctrines that I gave to you. Now, tomorrow, we're going to start about hair, the length of hair. I am no longer a hippie, so you're safe. Anyway, join us tomorrow as we continue our study in the book of 1 Corinthians.